Hello, I'm Dennis Kaplinger and welcome to Bluegrass Guitar Basics. If you're a beginning guitarist, even if you've never played before, we're going to start from scratch and show you everything that you need to know to get started playing bluegrass guitar. If you've already played some guitar, you might want to review the basics and then move on to learning the tunes. And we'll also teach you a little bit about how to play backup rhythm guitar so that you can play with other folks as well. Let's get started by just talking about the parts of the guitar here. I guess we made out of bone that the strings cross over to get to the tail piece here. Of course, you have your sound hole in the middle of the guitar here. And this, of course, is the neck of the guitar, and it heads up to the peg head where you have your tuning pegs, and there's 6 of those, so we have 6 strings on the guitar. This white piece right here is called the nut, and it's usually made out of bone on most guitars. The metal pieces right here, they go across the neck, those are called frets. And the frets are numbered. This is fret number 1, fret number 2, fret 3, 4, 5, and so on. When I tell you to play something at a certain fret, like for example, if I tell you to play the first string right here at the 3rd fret, I want you to put your finger just behind that fret. So just behind the fret towards the nut, and not on top of the fret. If you put your finger right on top of the fret, you get a muted tone. So you want to be right behind the fret where you get a nice, clean, clear tone. One last thing about this is the direction. When you head up the neck, it's kind of backwards than what you might think. Up the neck is going this way. When you head down the neck, that's this way. So it's up the neck because the pitches go up as you go up the neck, like that, and they go down as you go down the neck. Okay. Let's talk about the strings. Now the strings, we're going to call them by numbers rather than their note names, just because it seems to be easier if you don't know a lot about music theory or about notes and things like that. So they're numbered 1 through 6. The first string is the little one closest to the floor. So this is the 1st string, 2nd string, 3rd string, 4th string, 5th string, and 6th string. Okay. So let's move on to talking about picks. When you play bluegrass guitar, you want to use a flat pick, and there's a lot of different kinds. Most of them look something like this one right here. This happens to be a Fender. I think it's a medium pick, but different companies make them. Gibson makes them. Fender, a lot of different companies. This one is kind of in a triangular shape, and some picks are, you'll find bluegrass players will use picks that are round sometimes, or sort of oval shaped or whatever. I like to use this type of pick, and I like to use the pointed edge of the pick down here. Some players will use the rounded corner right here, and playing with the rounded corner tends to give you a little so. Okay, let's talk about your hand placement for flat picking. This is real important. What you want to try and do is cultivate a loose wrist, and you'll see when you get started, sometimes there's a tendency to play with your whole forearm like this, and there are people that play that way, and it works fine for them, but I think you're going to want to try and get started by just keeping your wrist as loose as you possibly can. When you're practicing these exercises and the tunes that are on the video, always think about your wrist and try to concentrate on keeping it as loose as possible. When I play, I tend to not far enough up to where it mutes the string, like that, but just back where, you know, I can get a decent tone there. Kind of like to keep my hand there because it keeps my pick right about right in here at the back edge, about an inch or half an inch to an inch behind the back edge of the sound hole right here, and that seems to work best for me. What you don't want to do, and what's going to be really difficult if you get in the habit of doing this, is moving your hand way out here over the sound hole and trying to pick out over here. Because for one thing, I mean, you can do it, but unless you anchor your fingers down on the head, you don't really have any sort of way of gauging where you are, which string you're playing. And that's going to be real important when we start playing these exercises and the tunes. Just having your hand sort of lightly resting right here allows you to gauge where you are, what string you're playing. So that's a real important thing. I'd like to talk to you about tuning right now. There's a lot of different ways to tune the guitar, but the best way to do it these days is to make use of the technology, I think, and get yourself an electronic tuner. Every professional musician that I know uses an electronic tuner. Even if they fine-tune the guitar later, they'll get the basic pitches with an electronic tuner. I've already tuned my guitar today with an electronic tuner, so hopefully I'm still in tune. This is the first string, which is an E note. Here's the second string, which is a B note. The third string, or G. The fourth string, which is D. The fifth string is A. And the sixth string, which is E. And when I was a kid, I learned the names of the strings. Elephants and donkeys got big ears. And I never got very good grades in English, but I remember the names of the strings that way. There is another way to tune your strings, which is if you can get the low E string in tune, you can match the other strings to that. And so if you get your E in tune off a piano or a pitch pipe or somebody else's guitar, you can match the fifth fret rather of the low E string to the open fifth string, which is an A note. So fifth fret of the low E to the open A string. And then you can, once that string's in tune, you match the fifth fret of the fifth string, that's a D note, to the open fourth string, which is also a D. Okay. Once that's in tune, you can match the fifth fret of the D string, or the fourth string, which is a G note, to the open third string, which is also a G. Then this is a little different. This changes here. Then you can match the fourth fret of the third string, which is a B note. You go back to the fifth fret of the second string, which is an E note, and match that to the open first string, which is also an E. Okay, let's talk about some right hand basics here. Get you started with some right hand picking exercises here. The way I like to think of it is your right hand is kind of like your voice. It's saying. we're going to start playing just some downstrokes. Now, you have two choices with a flat pick. You either go down or you go up. You got your downstrokes and your upstrokes. And we're going to start with downstrokes. These would be called, in musical terminology, if we were counting them, we'd count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are called quarter notes. So I'm going to play some quarter notes across the strings just real quick for you. I'll do 4 on each string, all downstrokes. Okay, now this may seem like kind of a, boring exercise to you, but if you can force yourself to do this, it will really help your right hand to get used to where it, each string is actually feels differently to your right hand, whether you know it or not. What you want to try and do, and I don't know if you can tell if it's really showing up or not, but what I try to do is, as I'm playing, I don't just keep my wrist anchored in one place. My wrist is lightly sitting there, but as I move across the strings, my hand is moving like this, so that my pick relationship, the angle of the pick to the string, hopefully remains relatively the same with each string. What you don't want is to have your pick striking the 6th string at a flat angle like this, and then going down to the 1st string and striking it at an angle like this from the side, because your tone is going to be unbalanced. So you want to keep your hand moving back and forth like that across the strings. So practice those quarter notes over and over again. You can't do that too much. One thing, if you'll notice, when you're playing the downstrokes, the quarter notes, if you analyze what's happening microscopically, on a downstroke you go down and then you go down again, but between each one of those you actually brought the pick back up. And so your hand is really always going down and up, back and forth, in kind of what we would call an 8th note fashion. In other words, it's going, the downstrokes are the numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4. The upstrokes are the ands between the numbers. So you would count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And the upstrokes are the ands like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on and so forth. So if I play some 8th notes across real fast. Okay, those would be 8th notes going across. When you're playing the tunes and the exercises on this video, it's really important that you keep track of your pick direction. You won't always be playing a series of 8th notes. Sometimes you'll be leaving certain notes out. Like for example, you might have a phrase that goes like this. And so it's like, so that when you're working like that and you're creating a kind of a syncopated pattern, what you've got to keep the pick pattern consistent. If you don't, you'll get your picking backwards, and then you'll get into a situation where you'll be making mistakes and your playing won't be as smooth as it could be. So you'll notice in my playing, and also when you watch the performance videos of the band, both John Moore and Kenny Blackwell, who are fantastic flat pickers, you'll see that about their hands. No matter what they're doing, they're keeping that consistent back and forth motion going, with the numbers being the downstrokes and the ands between the numbers being the upstrokes. So it's really, really important that you adhere to that. Okay, let's focus a little bit on our left hand now. When you're playing the guitar, kind of a general rule of thumb is to try and keep, no pun intended, your thumb on the back of the neck. You'll see classical guitarists are real adamant about that. They keep their thumb right in the center, the palm of their thumb right in the center of the back of the neck, and it gives them good access for all of their fingers on their left hand. In bluegrass, we kind of sort of adhere to that, but not quite as radical as the classical guys do. But what you don't want to do is let the neck rest in the V, right in here, the V of your hand. So what you want to try and do is keep your thumb around in the back of the neck there, and keep your fingers, it allows you to get your fingers arched up over the top of your fingerboard, and helps you to play more precisely that way. So let's learn 3 chords right now, the 3 main chords in the key of G. A lot of the tunes that we're going to be learning on this tape are in the key of G, so if you learn these chords, you can learn to play backup along with them, and you'll notice that these are the same chords that you'll see John Moore playing a lot on the guitar in the band video footage. So the main chord in the key of G is G, and it looks like this right here. Okay, so what I'm doing is I have my index finger of my left hand is on the 2nd fret of the 5th string, and my middle finger is on the 3rd fret of the 6th string, and then my ring finger is on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, and then the other strings are just open. Okay, so when you're practicing making these chords, what you want to do is make the chord and then strum each, I mean not strum, but pick each string individually to make sure that you're fretting it cleanly. If you're misfretting one of the strings, I'll try and make a mistake here and do that. You'll hear it when you play them individually. There you go. Okay. If you just strum, sometimes you can't hear that you're missing strings, or at least you won't know which ones you're missing, or which notes you're not fretting correctly. So play each string individually. Okay, so that's a G chord. Okay, so the next important chord in the key of G is the C chord, and this is what a C chord looks like. Okay, so to make a C chord, you put your index finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string, put your middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, and put your ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Okay. Okay, and for the sake of rhythm playing in bluegrass right now, you can hit the low 6th string, but we don't really use it that much when we're playing a C chord in bluegrass. So just play from the 5th string down, like that. And once again, just like with the G chord, play each note individually, like that. Okay, so we've got G and C. Okay, now the 3rd major chord in the key of G is D. And a D chord looks like this. Okay, D chord is your 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and your middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 1st string, and your ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. That position looks kind of like a little triangle there if you're visualizing. Sometimes, I might mention this, sometimes when you're trying to remember chords, it helps to get the geometric position, or the geometric shape of the chord in your head. That to me has always looked like a little triangle. Sometimes you'll see little chord diagrams that are a series of dots, and sometimes you can remember what the chord looks like by remembering the shape. So that's a D chord. As well. It's just a habit to reach up and wrap your thumb around the 2nd fret of the low 6th string, And after all the big deal I just made out of keeping your thumb in the middle of the back of the neck, I shouldn't do that. But that's a hillbilly habit that some of us bluegrassers have. The low sixth string does not harmonize with the D chord. It's an off note. It's a low E. If you wrap your thumb around, you get an F sharp, which does harmonize with the chord. So sometimes I wrap my thumb around just in case I don't play the chord right, and at least I'll hit a note that's in the chord, and it won't sound like a mistake when I'm strumming. For a D chord, we will use fifth string, which is a low A note. But when you're strumming the chord, you can just strum from the fourth string down. D, so 4, 3, 2, 1 for a D chord. So we've got G, C, and D. Okay, you can play a lot of bluegrass with those three chords right there in a capo. Right now what we're going to do is the next step, of course, and this is a huge step if you're a beginner and you've never played before, is to learn to change between those three chords evenly and cleanly in time. And this is a big deal, so spend some time on this. Don't race past this without perfecting it, because it'll mess you up from here on out if you can't do it right. So let's try just strumming 4 times on each one of the chords. So you'd have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an exercise you can't do that. And just go back and forth. When I was learning to play guitar at home when I was living with my folks, at night we'd all be watching TV. They wouldn't let me play except during the commercials, so I'd be sitting there with the guitar and I'd just hold my strings here and go like this back and forth, learning all the different chords and stuff. I did that for years. You can get a lot of practice in that way without actually picking the guitar. Okay, so we've covered the 3 main chords. Now I want to show you patterns that we worked on earlier with some left-hand notes that are in the key of G that we'll use to play some songs here very shortly. So a G scale starts on the low G string, or the low G note, which is the 3rd fret of the 6th string, this note right here. And I'm going to play these all with downstrokes right now just to teach you the left-hand notes. So it's G, and then the open 5th string, which is A, B, which is the 2nd fret of the 5th string, C, which is the 3rd fret of the 5th string, open D string, E, which is the 2nd fret of the D string, or the 4th string, F sharp, which is the 4th fret of the 4th string, and then G. So let's recap that scale, which is the lower octave of the G scale. Okay, now we'll learn that scale in the upper octave. It starts on the G string, with the 3rd string open. Then you play the 2nd fret of the G string, or the 3rd string. Then the 2nd string open, which is a B note. The 1st fret of the 2nd string, which is a C. The 3rd fret of the 2nd string, which is D. And then the open 1st string, which is E. And then the 2nd fret of the 1st string, which is F sharp. And then the 3rd fret of the E string, which is G. And don't worry about memorizing the names of the notes. It's important to know that, and it's good to know that. But for right now, just learn where your fingers go. It's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, if you remember that. So the high octave, once again, is. Okay? So now let's put both octaves together. Okay? Now, work on the scale like that, and just use downstrokes in your right hand until you're really confident with where those notes are in your left hand, because it's going to start getting tricky the minute you start playing that scale with downstrokes and upstrokes, like we're about to do right now. So now we're going to play those same notes over 2 octaves like that, but we're going to play them down and up. So it'll be a series of eighth notes. And let me just play it for you, and then we'll slow it down. Once again. Okay. Now, to slow that down a little bit, the G, the first note would be a downstroke. Then the A string is up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Okay? And you can also play that back down again. So you start up at on the high note and come backwards, which I recommend you do. Like that, just back and forth. One of the things that you want to be aware of when you're playing is that, you remember I was talking about moving my hand across the strings in order to keep the pick relationship, the angle of the pick in the same relationship to each string. One thing that'll happen sometimes as you're playing across the strings this way, if you think about it, you're going to be moving this way with your hand, but you'll be playing upstrokes. So just because you're moving across the string this way doesn't mean that you're playing downstrokes. And when you move back this way, you're playing upstrokes. There's a lot of other guitar styles that you'll see, some rock styles, and there's some jazz things that I've seen people play before, where they will do pick patterns where if they want to play a series of notes moving across the strings this way, they'll play them all with a downstroke that moves across 3 strings like that, or backwards, that sort of thing. Don't get caught up in that at this stage of the game, because in bluegrass playing, while there are advanced players that integrate some of those other techniques into their playing, you want to get started with keeping that down and upstroke deal consistent. I can't emphasize that enough. So just slow it down, and like that right there is an example. That second note right there is what I'm talking about. I'm heading this direction across the strings from the 6th to the 5th string, but it's on an upstroke. Now there's a string crossing that's a downstroke. There's another one that's an upstroke. Another upstroke. Downstroke. So the string crossing, if you keep your hand going back and forth, you'll really develop the ability to flat pick much better than if you get all confused and try and cross strings with the same pick direction. So. And I left a note out of that, but hey, it's bluegrass. Okay, I'd like to teach you a rhythm pattern, a right-hand picking pattern now that is often referred to as a fiddle shuffle by bluegrass players, because fiddlers will play this bowing pattern a lot. If you count this pattern, it sounds like 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and you'll hear a fiddler go da 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 da, like that, maybe to start a tune. And this pattern figures real predominantly in a lot of the picking that we'll be doing on the tunes that we'll be learning, and also in the rhythm playing in bluegrass. So let's just try it on the G string, the 3rd string. It would look like this. So it'd be 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. And the thing to remember about this pattern is you want to keep the pick strokes consistent. The numbers are downstrokes, and the ands are upstrokes. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. Well, you don't want to do it like this. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. That's going to get you messed up if you get into that. So you want to just keep that downstroke, upstroke pattern going. And that's called a fiddle shuffle. You want to practice that on each one of your strings. You might hold a G chord and just go across like that. And that's the fiddle shuffle. Okay, let's talk about how to play some bluegrass rhythm now. Most of the time when you're playing guitar in a band situation, you'll be playing rhythm. So you got to work on your rhythm playing an awful lot. So let's start out. We'll use the 3 chords that we've already learned, G, C, and D. And let me just show you the basic pattern using a G chord. What you want to do is you hit a bass note and then you strum downstroke. So for G, the root of the chord is if you're making it holding a G chord, the root of the chord would be on the 6th string down here. So you just hit it and then play a downstroke. So that's the basis of the bluegrass strum in your right hand. When you play the downstroke part of it, the rhythm strum, you don't want to hit all 6 strings. If you can take a look at it, you just play the top 3 or 4 strings. You don't hit all 6. You don't go, okay, you just hit the top 2 or 3 or 4. Like that, okay? So that's the basic pattern for a G chord. Basic pattern for a C chord, the root note would be the C note that's on the 5th string. And you do the same pattern in your right hand. Okay? For a D chord, you make a D chord and then you hit the 4th string. Like that. So if I played through all 3 chords, it would be like. So you can see how important it is for you to be able to change chords in your left hand without thinking about it, because you're really going to be focusing on what you're doing with your right hand over here. Okay, once you get that pattern down, now we're going to expand it a little bit more, and this will really start to sound like bluegrass rhythm playing. You want to be able to alternate the bass notes. In the last example, we just kept hitting one single bass note. What you'll actually be doing most times will be alternating the bass notes. So on a G chord, I mean, there's many different ways that you can alternate the bass notes, but most commonly for a G chord, you'd hit the 6th string and strum, then hit the 4th string, which is a D note, and strum. You get that pattern going. Like that. For a C chord, there's many different possibilities, but for now what we'll do is we'll hit the 5th string and then we'll hit the 4th string. Like that. For a D chord, what we'll do is we'll hit the D string and then strum, and then hit the A string or the 5th string. So you hit the 4th string, strum, then hit the 5th string and strum. And the bass notes are kind of heading in the opposite direction. Like that. So if we put all this together now, it would sound like this. Okay, and you can't practice that too much. It's like anything else, boy, you got to work on that. Now, one final thing I want to touch on, you can play good bluegrass rhythm just like that, and you get a lot of mileage out of that. But You can also apply that pattern that we just learned a little while ago, the shuffle pattern, the fiddle shuffle pattern, if you remember, which was 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. We can apply that to this rhythm. So instead of just playing 1, 2, 3, 4, we can play 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. So what you're doing on the 1, 2, and, on the upstroke, you're just kind of hitting maybe the first and the second string. You have to check the video out here and see what I'm actually doing, but you certainly don't play the whole chord. So it would be like. Like that, okay? If I speed it up a little bit. Okay? Okay, let's learn our first bluegrass tune here. This is an old-time fiddle tune called Boil the Cabbage Down, and it goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and if you'll notice what I'm doing there in the right hand is I'm doing that fiddle shuffle the whole time. And just playing through the melody notes. And the melody notes are very simple in the right hand. They all come from the G scale. So if you've been practicing your G scale, you'll have it. I'll slow this down for you here. Okay? And the chords to that, I'll show them to you real quick. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And you can check out the band video footage of Boil the Cabbage Down and watch John Moore play it on the guitar. Okay, let's learn another little tune here. This is an old favorite called Skip to Maloo, and it sounds like this. Okay, let me slow that down. I'm sure you've heard this a million times, learned it in grade school probably. Let's slow that down here for you. Okay, now the important thing about this song, this is a good exercise because most melodies that you'll play in bluegrass music will not have the same right-hand picking pattern going through the entire melody the way that Boil the Cabbage did. So in Boil the Cabbage Down, I used the shuffle pattern in my right hand for the whole thing. In this tune, I'm alternating between quarter note downstrokes and the shuffle pattern. So there's quarter notes and eighth notes happening. And so, for example, this very first phrase. See, the only upstroke was during the shuffle pattern. I didn't go like this. See, because that would get my right hand all screwed up. And so you got to count. You got to keep the downstrokes and the upstrokes separate. Okay. The next phrase in the tune I want to show you just real quick regarding the left hand. I played it like this. I reached up with my little finger to the 4th fret. If you don't want to do that at this point, because that could be quite a stretch for you, it'd be good for you to practice it that way. You could use your 1st finger here on the 2nd fret and play. Okay, and then you could shift back and use your middle finger here so that you could use your index finger here. I just did it like so that I don't have to shift my hand. You could do it like that. Either way is valid. Okay, the chords for that are like this. Okay, and that's skip to Malou. Let's talk about some left-hand techniques that you can use in bluegrass music to help you get more notes without having to pick each note with your right hand. The first one I'd like to talk about is called a slide. Slides, you can use any finger of your left hand to slide. You can slide between any different frets. There's all kinds of different licks that you can do. Right now I'd like to show you a slide between the 2nd and the 4th fret on the 3rd string. You take your middle finger on your left hand, put it on the 2nd fret, okay, and we're going to slide from 2 to 4. Like that. You could, I'll show you another one. This is a common one between the 4th fret on the 4th string and the 5th fret on the 4th string. Sounds like this. Okay. When you slide, the important thing, no matter where you're sliding on any part of the neck, you want the 2nd note that you're sliding to be equal in volume to the 1st note, if you can. So you have, okay? Try to make them real clean. You can also practice sliding backwards. We'll do some of that too. Let's use that 2-4 slide right there in another version of Boil the Cabbage Down. Sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that's actually, I think on the band performance video footage, John Moore plays that as the 2nd half of his 1st solo. So if I slow that way down, it looks like this. Okay, and just to focus on a couple little areas there, when you're doing that slide, you want to slide from 2 to 4 and just leave your 2nd finger down on the 4th fret. Take your index finger and put it down on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And then your hand will be in position for the reverse slide that you do right afterwards. So check it out. Okay? And let's talk also about the ending phrase, which goes, okay? That's a real good right-hand picking exercise right there, because it's one of those deals where you're crossing strings a lot. So when you work on that phrase, make sure that you keep your pick direction correct. Let's talk about another left-hand technique called a hammer-on. And what that is you play a string, and then you hammer like this. I'll play the fourth string and hammer the second fret using my middle finger of my left hand. Okay, and so the object is, once again, just like with the slide, to make the second note, which you're not picking with your right hand, sound just as loud as the first one. Okay, let's move to the third string, try the second fret. Okay, so that's one type of hammer-on. There's another type too, where you can have one finger down already, like for example, my index finger on the second fret of the third string, and I can hammer the fourth fret with my ring finger like this. Or I can hammer the third fret. And it has a hammer-on in it, and we'll be using that first hammer-on, the second fret of the fourth string. We'll be using that hammer-on in this tune. So I'll play you a little bit of Cripple Creek here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let me show you the, you'll notice in there that we're using a lot of the same, we're using that same 2/4 slide that we used in Boil the Cabbage Down, but the end phrase has a hammer in it, the phrase that goes. Okay, so let me slow this down for you, and I want you to watch for that hammer, and then also watch how my pick direction in the right hand, I stay to that shuffle pattern. And I do some back and forth alternating picking as well, but I'm always conscious of my downs and my upstrokes. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that's Cripple Creek. And remember that for the chords to Cripple Creek, you can, in any of these tunes, you can always download the PDF file, the tablature files, and print those out so that you can get the chords and play along with the video. Let's talk now about a third technique, which is called pull-offs. Okay, now a pull-off is exactly the opposite of a hammer-on. With a pull-off, you've already got a fretted note, like for example, the second fret of the third string, and you play that note and then you pull your finger off. Okay? And you try to make the second note, once again, just as loud as the first one that you picked. Okay? Here's a pull off from the second fret of the fourth string to the open string. Okay? And you can also do it, for example, if I could put my index finger down on the second fret of the third string, put my middle finger on the third fret of the third string, and pull off from my third finger, or my second finger, to my first finger, like that. Okay, so that's a very common technique as well. Okay, let's learn a new tune now that uses some pull-offs. This is an old-time fiddle tune that's very popular in jamming. It's called Old Joe Clark. And this tune is actually, we're going to learn it in the key of G, but it uses an F natural note instead of an F sharp. And so that scale, if you remember the high octave G scale that we learned, it went like this. right there. It uses that F sharp. This Old Joe Clark uses an F natural. Okay, and the correct musical mode for that is called the Mixolydian mode. You can learn that Mixolydian and impress all your friends at the next jam session. Anyhow, the tune also will use an F sharp as well, so it's using both notes. One thing you'll discover about old-time music and bluegrass music and Appalachian music and Irish music is they're not really concerned about the theory of it. They don't, if they want to use notes that aren't supposed to lay in the scale, they go ahead and use them because nobody told them that they couldn't. So, okay, so here's Old Joe Clark. Okay, let's slow Old Joe Clark down. Here we go. Okay, so the first part, or the A section of the tune, is pretty cut and dried. You can just check that out on the video. The pull-off that we talked about is in the second half of the tune, the B section, which also has a slide in it. So when you do that slide, I think I was doing it with my middle finger, like that. You could use your third or your ring finger. Okay, so that section. Right here, that's the pull-off right there. Okay, now that little phrase, the harmony right there is over an F chord, which is a new chord that we haven't looked at yet. An F chord, there's many different ways of playing it, but most bluegrass players will play it like this. They'll have their index finger across the first and second strings at the first fret, and their middle finger on the second fret of the third string, and then their ring finger on the third fret of the fourth string. Okay, there is a full bar chord pattern that conventional guitar players use, which looks like that. This F is sort of a partial chord, but this is how we bluegrassers do it. You'll see sometimes people will wrap their thumb up around the sixth string up there, which I wouldn't advise doing at this point, but later on you can try it. I think John does it on the video a few times. As far as playing rhythm with an F chord, the alternating bass notes that you'd want to use would be the fourth string, which is the F note, and then you can, this is kind of tricky, but you can do it. You move that finger over to the third fret of the fifth string and get a C note and play that. So let me play this rhythm pattern for you. Okay. Now, I know that a lot of people, if your fingers are big enough, the ends of your fingers are wide enough, you can put one finger down across both strings. A lot of bluegrassers do that. John does that on the video. Like that. Okay? So just work with one of those two, and you can once again print out the PDF file for the backup to Old Joe Clark. Let's learn a real common bluegrass run or lick that was, it's commonly called a Lester Flatt G run, or just the G run. Lester Flatt was, of course, played guitar originally with Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys in the middle 40s, and then he left and joined with Earl Scruggs and Flatt and Scruggs and the Foggy Mountain Boys. Were a very popular bluegrass band, and incidentally, you need to listen to as much of that stuff as you can, any of Bill Monroe's stuff, or especially Lester and Earl's stuff, or really help you become a better player. This is what the G run sounds like that he popularized. Okay, simple little run. It's deceptively simple. Okay, Lester actually played guitar with his thumb pick and a finger pick. He didn't use a flat pick, but you'll hear that run a lot in their music if you listen to it. Let me just slow that down for you a little bit. It sounds like this. Okay. Now that run is it's a combination of regular back and forth picking and some hammers and a pull off. So it's, okay, that's a little slide right there, or you can hammer that actually between your first and second fingers. Sometimes I play it as a slide, but you might want to learn it as a hammer. Okay, then there's a pull off right there, and then the last note. Okay. Now you can use that pattern while you're playing bluegrass rhythm, and that's kind of neat. You get it going like this. Okay, and very often people will use that pattern at the end of a phrase, like. Okay. Let's learn that same pattern in a couple other keys, or for a couple other chords. In the key of C, or for a C chord, the pattern sounds like. Okay, so if I slow that down, you just hold like a C chord position, is your basic position in the left hand, and it's. Okay, so it's the same basic right hand picking pattern. You're just, there's that hammer again, pull off, and that time you end on a C note. So in the rhythm part for C, it would be. Like that. Okay, you can also do it in the key of D. Now in the key of D, it's a little bit different because we don't have a low D note to start with. So we'll use the fourth string open, and then we'll start the lick down on the sixth string. So it's like, okay, we'll just try it in the rhythm stroke here. Like that. So if we break that down a little bit, it's the D string, then so it's always the same right hand pattern there as far as how I'm doing it here. There are other ways to play that run, and you can experiment with that. You'll see John do it in the video a few times, but okay. One of the things you're going to need to learn how to do is use a capo for your guitar. Most of the band video footage that you'll see is John's using a capo at the second fret. What a capo does is it allows you to play what you've already learned, for example, in the key of G, in a different key. You can still use the same hand positions and everything. A capo basically is like taking the nut and moving it up, and it raises the pitch of everything. So for example, if I take my capo and put it on the 2nd fret right here, when you put the capo on, you put it just like your finger, just a little bit behind the fret. So if you put it on right here and just attach it like that, just make sure that it's on there nice and snug, not too tight. If you put a capo on there too tight, it pulls the strings down too tight and pulls the guitar out of tune. So you just want to make sure that every string rings clearly. Now, if I make a G chord, I just pretend that this is the new nut, go up 3 frets and make my G chord. I'm playing a G chord, but it's actually sounding as an A chord. Okay? If I put the capo on the 3rd fret, I'd be in B flat. On the 4th fret, it would be B, and so on and so forth. For example, if you take a song like Boil the Cabbage Down, for example, or Old Joe Clark, which we learned in G, or Cripple Creek, the band plays those tunes in A. The reason for that is because a mandolinist or a fiddle player or an upright bass player, they don't use capos, so they'll learn a tune in the actual key, maybe where the tune is written. Like Old Joe Clark is always played in the key of A for the most part, and we learned it in G because it's easier to play that way on the guitar, and now we need to be able to play with everybody else. So we put the capo on and play Old Joe Clark in the key of A. Okay, let's watch the first 3 band performance videos now. Boil the Cabbage Down, Cripple Creek, and Old Joe Clark. Remember that when you can always print out the PDF files on these tunes and look at the chord progressions and play along with the videos. I want to let you know that the band that I assembled for the videos are some of my favorite players, guys that I've played with for a long time. John Moore's playing guitar, Bill Bryson's playing bass, and Kenny Blackwell's playing mandolin. All great musicians. Kenny and John are both fabulous flat pickers. It'll be interesting for you to watch their techniques because while they're both flat picking, they're doing it a little bit differently. And they both certainly have their own styles. So check it out, and it just goes to show you that you have to develop your own thing, even though you both, even though both of them use the same basic technique and whatnot. Also, remember that when you're watching these videos, each one of the instruments is going to solo more than once. The first solo that we play will be the tablature that, or the version that I just taught you of the tunes. So when John takes his first solo, it'll be what I've just taught you for Cripple Creek, for example. And then his second solo, he expands on it and plays it the way that he would normally play it. So you can learn a lot by watching those solos as well. So have fun watching the band performance videos and playing along. Okay, let's learn a tune now in a new key. We're going to learn a tune in the key of D. And before we do this, let's learn the D scale. It's always a good idea to learn the scale of the key that you're going to play in, because most of these tunes, the melodies of the tunes, are directly taken from the scale of the key that you're playing in. So here's a D scale. Okay, there's a D chord, that's the sound. Here's the scale right here. Okay, that's a 1-octave D scale there. I'll slow that down for you. Okay, the notes are D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. You remember that when we were in the key of G, we used C natural, the first fret of the second string. Now we're using the second fret of the second string, which is a C sharp note. Also, in order to play this next tune, you're going to have to learn some other notes that are also in the D scale that lay down here in this part of the neck. So let's learn part of the high octave D scale. This won't be a complete D scale, it'll just be the first 5 notes. Starts with D, open E, F sharp on the second fret, G on the 3rd fret, and A up here with your little finger. So it's time to get your little finger into action here. So you're going to want to practice using your little finger here. And I'll tell you a little bit about that as far as using your little finger. What you want to try and do is keep your fingers poised over the neck. It's going to involve, it takes a while to learn to get your muscles into shape to do this and not have your fingers flailing out like this away from the neck where you have to bring them way down to fret. You want to try and keep your fingers poised over the strings if you can. Just work on it, you'll get it. So here's the whole D scale that you're going to need for this tune. Okay? Now the tune that we're going to learn right now is called Soldier's Joy, and this is another great old-time fiddle tune that everybody knows and plays at the jam sessions. So, okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Okay, so that's Soldier's Joy. All right, and let's slow that down here. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's the A section. Now I want to call your attention to this first picking pattern right here. Okay, so right there, that's something that you might want to isolate and just work on as a picking exercise. Like that, okay? Work on that a lot, because it's kind of hard to do when you speed it up. Okay, and also that ending phrase, that's where you use your little finger. Right there, okay? So now the B part of the song uses those same notes in the upper register. It goes like this. Okay. And one thing that I also want to show you at this point, because on the band performance video, John Moore starts this tune on the guitar, and he starts it with a very common intro technique that you'll see fiddlers use this a lot. It's what we talked about earlier with the fiddle shuffle pattern. It's often referred to as 8 taters for some reason. But what it is it's a pattern that sounds like this. Okay, and in the right hand it's that fiddle shuffle pattern. Like that. But you can put a slide into it or a hammer into it from the 4th to the 5th fret on the 6th string. So it's kind of like this. Okay, you could also hammer those 2 notes. Okay, and you can try it both ways. Let me just play it for you and then start into the tune. Like that. In order to play the chords to Soldier's Joy, you're going to need to learn a new chord now, and that is an A chord. Now, an A chord, the way there's a number of different ways to do it, but the way that I do it is I put my index finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. That's an A note. Take my middle finger and put it on the 2nd fret of the 4th string. That's an E note. And take my my ring finger and put it on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string. That's a C sharp note. Okay? Now some people make that chord, they'll swap the position of their 1st and their 2nd fingers, like this. That's always been more difficult for me to do. So this is always easier for me. But you can experiment with both ways. I've seen it done both ways. That is an A chord. Now the bass strum pattern for an A chord would be hit the 5th string, that's the A note, and strum, then hit the 4th string and strum. So, okay. So for Soldier's Joy, the 3 chords that you use are D, G, so D, G, and A. And once again, print out the PDF file and watch the band footage and get the chords to Soldier's Joy. Here's a great little tune called Salt Creek. Okay, now Salt Creek is a jam session favorite once again, so you want to get this one where you can play it in the jams. Let me slow it down for you. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's the A section. Now, once again, this tune is actually using the Mixolydian mode that we talked about for Old Joe Clark. So it's using an F natural note as well as an F sharp note. So let's take a look at the one, it's also using an F chord. The chords for this go G, C, and then it goes straight to F. F, F, D in that part. So let's look at the F phrase. When we go, then right here you want to make what would be a partial F chord. If you remember the F chord position, when I play it, I don't lay my first finger down across both strings, but I am playing the C note, the A note, and the F note. And I just hold my first and my third fingers down, and I play this section like that. So I'm just actually lifting my middle finger of my left hand up and down. Like that, okay? So that's a tricky little part in the first section there. The second section actually is quite involved here. So this, you're gonna have to learn to stretch your little finger out here in order to play this second section. This will be very good for you. So what you do is you put your index finger across the first and the second strings at the 3rd fret, right there, and you play okay. So you reach clear up to the 7th fret with your little finger, and it's with your ring finger. Then move your ring finger over to the 2nd string at the 5th fret. Okay, so. Okay, then move that whole thing down 2 frets and play exactly the same lick again. Okay, then move it back up again. Okay, so that last little lick, that's a neat little lick. That's a very bluegrassy ending lick right there. Okay, this lick right here that you're learning is a movable lick. I mean, you could play that lick, those kind of licks, you can get a lot of mileage out of those in bluegrass music, because we play that lick over the G chord and then it slides down and we play it over the F chord. In another song, you could play it over an A chord, move it up 2 frets. You could play it over a C way up here. You know, so movable licks like that that don't use open strings are very valuable sometimes. So check out Salt Creek. Okay, let's learn a tune in the key of C now. So we'll start out by learning the C scale. Based out of this C chord position, you'd start with your third finger right here on a C note on the 5th string, and this is what the scale sounds like. Okay, 1 octave right there. And when you're playing the scale, if you can kind of visualize the C chord position, you can see that the notes kind of all lay right within there. Okay, so let me slow that down for you. That's it. Okay, it starts with a C, D, E, F natural, G, A, B, C. Okay, and that's a C scale. Now the song that we're going to learn is a song that was popularized by the Carter family earlier in the 20th century, in the early 1900s, and it's called The Wildwood Flower. And in order to kind of get started with this, I'd like to show you the basis of what's called Carter family or Carter style guitar. And what that is basically is it's a way to play a melody, usually on the lower strings, while you're keeping a rhythm pattern going. So a couple exercises that you can practice that will help you to play this tune that we're about to play. You can take the basic C chord or C strum, C rhythm strum that we worked on, which was. And what you can do is hammer into the note that you pick on the 4th string, the bass note. So it would be like. So you can see that I'm hammering. I'm still holding the C chord, but I'm just lifting my middle finger up and hammering. Like that. And if you do that and combine it with the shuffle pattern in your right hand, it sounds like this. Okay, and then if you move that over, and let's try that with an F chord, where we hold the F chord and we once again hammer the middle finger. So like that. Then you can try it with a G chord. Okay, and in this case we'd be hammering our 1st finger. We're going to hammer the note that we're playing on the 5th string, so it'd be. That. And it's also possible in this style to hammer other notes as well. So you can move your fingers around and hammer into other strings. Like, for example, in addition to hammering that note on the 5th string, I could move my index finger over and also hammer the 2nd fret of the 4th string for a little bit different effect, like this. Like that. Okay, so there's all sorts of different possibilities with that, but that's the basis of Carter family guitar. And now let's learn Wildwood Flower, which is a tune that uses that style of playing right there. Okay, so that's a classic. That's an old tune. So let's slow that down a little bit and try to analyze what's going on there. Okay, let's stop right there. That's the A section. Okay, you start with the C chord position, And the melody actually starts with the note that is on the 4th string. So, and then at that point you have to, you play the next melody note, which this is the 3rd fret of the 4th string. Hitting like the top 3 strings, the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st string. Okay, so. Okay, now right there I've moved my middle finger over to the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. Okay, now right here you might notice that I'm playing a G chord, but I'm using a different fingering. And when you're playing in the key of C, this is a common way of playing a G chord because you're still hitting the same notes. Normally we'd play a G like this. You're still hitting the same notes, but you're using a different fingering, and it makes it easy to go back and forth between G and C. You see how my middle finger and my ring finger are here when I'm making a C chord, and then they just have to move over here in order to make a G chord. So it may take you a while to get that down, but it would be a lot easier to do it this way than to go like that and then have to switch back to a C. So you really need to get that G position down. Okay, so okay, now here at this point in the tune, when we get back to the C chord, we're going to just play a regular rhythm pattern, but we're going to use alternating bass notes. Down here, instead of playing, normally we would have played the alternating bass stroke as like that. This time we're going to play C, G, go down to the low G. And in order to do that, you have to move this finger back and forth between the 5th and the 6th string. Or you can, if the tips of your fingers are big enough, you can put one finger across both of them. I can't do that and play the notes cleanly. I think when you're watching the performance video, I think John Moore actually does that. But anyhow, so, okay, then you play the same phrase again. Okay, then we move on to the second half of the tune where we go. Okay, so that's, you can slide into that note right there, the 5th fret of the 2nd string, then slide back out of it. Then you make a partial F chord. Here's the full F chord, if you remember. You don't put your ring finger down and you play. Then back to a C. Okay, then. And I'm hammering those notes. Back to that G position. And then finally a Lester flat run in the key of C. Okay, so that's Wildwood Flower. Let's show you a couple endings in the key of G that you can use for some of these tunes here. This first one here is kind of a fiddle tune style ending, and it goes like this. Okay, let me slow that down for you here. You start with your, of course, your index finger up here on the 3rd fret. Okay, so that ending has a backward slide in it. Right there. Okay, that's a good ending to use for fiddle tunes. Let me show you another one here that this is kind of a Tony Rice sort of style ending, and this is really good on bluegrass tune. Okay, let's slow that one down a little bit for you. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now that one's kind of tricky. It's got a lot of pull-offs and stuff in it, so you got to really watch your right hand pick direction. Okay, so just kind of study that in detail. Make sure you pay attention to the pick direction on that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about developing your right hand. Some exercises that you can use for picking. You can never work on your flat picking hand enough. It seems to be the problem that most people have. To be able to play fast, you have to be able to play precisely, and you don't want to be sloppy. So these exercises will help you out. In addition, of course, to just practicing the scales and the back and forth picking up and down and the shuffle pattern that we've already done, there are some real specific pick patterns that you can work on. You know, if I just start playing on the D string, for example, on the 4th string, and I go back and forth. Okay, that's the basic motion, of course. You can try spreading that across the strings a little bit here. So I start by playing all on 1 string, and then I'm going to change my upstrokes to the G string or the 3rd string, like that. Okay, then I can spread it out even more across the 4th, the 3rd, and the 2nd string. Now that's a common picking pattern that's called cross picking. And while we're not using that in any of the tunes, you still should be practicing it, because you're going to want to be able to do that at some point. So one more time, if I go and then spread it out across 2 strings and then 3 strings. What you'll notice about when you spread it out across 3 strings is that every time you go through the pattern, the pick direction reverses. So the first time it's down, up, down, and then up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. So, and then you can also spread it, I mean, you can spread it across all 6 strings if you want. So if I did that, it might be. Like that. Just kind of spreading it out that way. It gets your hand used to, you know, playing on different strings. There is another pattern that you can do where you play 2 notes on 1 string and the 3rd note on an adjacent string. So like this. Okay. I'm sorry. Like that. Okay, you can also reverse that. Play 1 note on the 1st string and 2 notes on the 2nd string. Okay, and of course you'd want to do all these patterns on all strings. all pairs of strings, so that you can learn to develop your pick, the precision of your pick. The last right hand exercise I'd like to show you is called a paradiddle. That's what I call it anyhow, and that comes from drummer terminology when they're practicing their sticking. A paradiddle pattern goes right, left, right, left, left, repeated over and over again. You can do that. Just pretend that the the fourth string, for example, is your left hand, and the third string is your right hand, and so it would be left, right, right, so to speak. So. Like that. And that's a hard one. You have to concentrate on that one, but if you can get to where you can do that cleanly, it'll help you a lot. We've actually sort of used that already in Salt Creek in the B section. If you remember that, the first part of that is a paradiddle right there. So they do have practical applications in your music. Let's talk about some exercises for your left hand now to develop your left hand. Scales are a great exercise. So we've learned a bunch of different scales, but let's focus on the G scale right now. We learned it before using open strings, and you can review that if you want. It is possible also to, instead of using the open strings, to use your fourth finger on the 5th fret to get the note that previously would have been the open string. So for example, instead of going, you can play. So let me just play this G scale here so there won't be any open strings in this scale. Okay, so that's a great exercise to just run that up and down. Like that, back and forth over and over again. And of course you can do that with the other scales as well. There are some other exercises here that I'd like to show you, and these are just kind of, they're not meant to sound good. They're just mechanical finger exercises for you, but they will help your left hand dexterity. The first one would be to just play, well, let me just play it for you and then I'll explain it. And so on and so forth. And basically what it is, if you think of, like with my index finger on the 2nd fret, think of one finger per fret on the string. So I'm going to exercise my 1st and 2nd fingers going back and forth all the way across the neck. Then I'm going to do, so that's like this, just going back and forth up and down with my pick. Then I'm going to use my ring finger and go ring finger to 2nd finger, coming back down, and then ring finger to little finger, going back up. That's the killer. So you can see the logic of it. You're just using 2 finger combinations like that. And like right now, I can really feel that it's helping my hands to get limber there. The other thing you can do is you can do every other finger. This is 1st to 3rd, 2nd to 4th, and you can also do 1st finger to 4th finger, like that. And when you're doing these exercises, the thing to try and work on is keeping your fingers down close to the fingerboard. You don't want your fingers up off the fingerboard. That's the whole point of this. Keep your hand poised right over the top of the string so that you can get to the notes quicker. Let me show you one more thing. This is a very good exercise here. Let's start this on the 1st string. You anchor your index finger at the 2nd fret, okay? And this is the exercise. So you're alternating 1st to 4th, 3rd to 4th, 2nd to 4th, and I'm talking about my fingers. So index to little, middle, little, index to little, ring, little, middle, little, index, little, over and over again. And you can move that to the next string. And so on and so forth. And you can do that all the way up the neck, up in here, anywhere. It's easier to do when you get up the neck because you don't have to stretch quite as far. But practice some of those exercises and you'll be limber in no time. Let's learn to play Blackberry Blossom in the key of G. Okay, so there's a lot going on in this tune, but it's nothing that, you know, we haven't already covered as far as the right hand picking patterns and stuff are concerned. Let's just slow it down. Here's the A section. I started it, of course, with 8 taters. Okay, so that's the A section, and it's all notes that are from the G scale. So if you've been practicing the G scale, you'll know where those notes are. Okay, the E, or the B section rather, where it goes to the key of E minor, that's a little tricky, okay? Let's just play this first phrase. Okay, now there's a couple different ways of doing this. The way I just did it right there, I've got the 4th string and the 5th string barred with my index finger. I've got my index finger across both strings at the 2nd fret. Okay. If you don't want to do this way, you could do it either with your index and your middle finger or your middle and your ring finger. We could try it that way. Okay, so. Okay, and that position that I was just holding right there where I'm barring those 2 notes, that's actually an E minor chord, which is what the harmony is right there. The band will be playing an E minor chord. So you got to learn to play that chord anyhow. That's actually the position that I use right there to play an E minor chord. So you can use it in the flat picking section as well. The second time through the B section of the tune, we play that same melody, but it's up an octave. So the fingering that I use for this now is I have my index finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string and I play. Okay, so I use my ring finger right here and I'm leaving my 1st finger down the whole time. Okay, that's a backward slide right there using my middle finger. Okay, then this next little lick is actually over a B chord. The band's playing a B chord and the lick goes. Okay, now that's a neat little technique right there where I've got my index finger on the 2nd fret and I'm hammering the 3rd fret of the 1st string. And then I'm pulling it off right afterwards. And that makes a little triplet, kind of an Irish ornamentation. There's that slide again. and then the same ending phrase that you use in the first part of the tune. And you'll find that that's true of a lot of fiddle tunes. The ending phrase of the A section was the same as the ending phrase of the B section. I also put a special ending on this tune. It's the first part of one of the endings that we've already learned. Okay? And then you play just the melody again. Except you play this ending phrase. Okay, which is just, it's just notes in a C scale or a G scale. And then I end with an E minor chord. Okay, and that's the ending that you see on the band video of Blackberry Blossom, except the banjo. I play it on the banjo instead of the guitar. But anyhow, you can work on that. As well as the E minor chord, you also have to learn another new chord to play the backup on this song, which is a B7 chord. And it looks like that right there. And what that is I've got my index finger on the 4th string at the 1st fret. I've got my middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string. Got my ring finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And I have my little finger on the 2nd fret of the 1st string. Okay? And the alternating pattern that you would use for that is you'd hit the 5th string, and then you could hit the 4th string like that. That would be good. Or you could hit the 5th string and then move your middle finger over to the 2nd fret of the low 6th string and use that as a bass note, like. Okay. Just remember that the strum part of it, you're only hitting the top 3 or 4 strings here. So like that. And for E minor, the rhythm pattern would be the low E string and then the 5th string. And then to B7. Like that. So that's Blackberry Blossom. I'd like to thank you for joining me for Bluegrass Guitar Basics, and hope you've had a good time. I sure have had a good time being with you here. I'd like to thank the band, John Moore on guitar, Bill Bryson on bass, and Kenny Blackwell on mandolin. Also thanks to Aaron Stang at Warner Publications and all the video crew at everybody. They made it a lot of fun for us to do this video for you. Also, I want to remind you that you can print out the PDF files of all the tablatures and all the backup for the tunes that are on this video. And also, there's a book that accompanies this video that's called Bluegrass Guitar Basics that you can get through Warner Publications as well, that goes into all the examples in a lot more detail and has more songs for you to learn as well. There's also Bluegrass Banjo Basics and Bluegrass Mandolin Basics, as well as the videos for those. So run out and buy multiple copies, please. Thank you. See you next time.